To the members of Pakistan's first Constituent Assembly, Lord Louis reads a message from the King proclaiming the new dominion. Britain and Pakistan part as friends, he said, both members of the British Commonwealth of Nations. "600 miles away in Delhi, Independence Day was also a day of rejoicing. Tumultuous crowds filled the streets, celebrating, singing and laughing. Police were called out many times to restore order, where everyone ran wild with joy. Outside the Constituent Assembly, crowds again broke through the police cordon. From the balcony of the building, Pandit Nehru, India's first premier, urges the crowd to let the procession move through. Earl Mountbatten's car was surrounded by thousands of wildly...
Shops in modern surroundings, all rearing skywards.
20 years ago, when Chua Peng Chai was a child, Singapore had a population of barely 1 million. Today, Peng Chai is senior planner in the government's state and city planning department, and he lives in a city of 2 million. He is planning a Singapore of 4 million people, twice as many inhabitants before the end of the century. To find room for that many people...
Imperial Japan ruled Taiwan from 1895 until its defeat in World War II in 1945. During those 50 years, Japan governed Taiwan with an iron fist. The Japanese rulers exploited Taiwan's resources, brutally suppressed dissent, forced the population to use the Japanese language, and clamped down on personal freedoms.
The Japanese colonial period was certainly one that involved significant repression. There were a large number of revolts and insurrections against Japanese rule that were violently put down by the Japanese military.
During World War II, the Japanese army opened brothels in Taiwan. Women were forced to serve the soldiers during the day and raped during the night. The Japanese also had comfort women in the Philippines, South Korea, and China. In total, around 200,000 were enslaved in Japanese-occupied territories. In 2015, Japanese Prime Minister Abe Shinzo signed a historic agreement with South Korea offering $8.3 million in reparations. So far, only South Korea has received an official apology.
With a community of survivors, and every time we would film together, every time we would try and talk about what happened in 1965, the military would come and stop us. I would be arrested, our crew would be arrested, our equipment would be taken, or we would be detained, and it was impossible really to get anything done. And at the same time, some of the survivors with whom I was living in this community, it was in a plantation about 60 miles from the city of Medan, where I made the act of killing, they would send me on these missions. They would send us to go film with a neighbor who they suspected or knew was a perpetrator and thought would know, for example, how a loved one had been killed. How one woman sent us to try and find out how her son was killed, someone else how her aunt was killed. And we would go on these kind of missions on behalf of the survivors to find out what had happened and encounter these perpetrators who, within minutes of meeting them, would boast about how they'd killed, about how they'd killed, the details of how they'd killed, and sometimes we'd find out how people's relatives had died.
To locate your work in terms of Chinese art and ancient Chinese culture, but also modernism, going back to Duchamp, I wonder though how you locate yourself.
I have very little knowledge about Chinese before I come back, and now I think I learned much more. But basically, I was a contemporary because my father was a contemporary poet, so I was very influenced by him to read those contemporary poetries, and then I like Duchamp or surrealism, Dada, and later the tradition, conceptual art and all those practice. And of course, I love Warhol's attitude, his communication and his, all his anxiety as a modern man, and so all those have a strong, maybe have some strong influence on me.
Mesa pakimu, usenosu, pares disosan.
Yaku useno ko bare saya tungan.
Tu pulutan